And we are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Ruby AI podcast. Today, we are joined by Joe Leo here, my co-host.
Hey, everybody.
And we have a very special guest today, Justin Bowen. Justin,
Hey,
you want to
thanks for
tell
having me.
everybody why you're famous here and why we've had you on?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm famous yet, but looking forward
You
to
are
it, I
Ruby
suppose.
famous. It's
That's
it's a
good.
special kind of fame.
Yeah, I've been a Ruby developer for 17 years now, and I only recently started going to conferences. During the pandemic, I won a ticket to RubyConf from Mike DeLassio. And then, just on Twitter, some thing that I entered, did the virtual thing, and then I did a talk 2021. That was my first talk virtually on Rails and computer vision, which is something I've been doing for about 10 years now. So yeah, excited to talk to you guys today about Active Agent and whatever else we come across.
That was a great talk, 2021. That was actually where I first saw you personally in the community.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just loved that talk where you had some agricultural imagery where you were superimposing the images together to find anomaly detection, so for plant health and stuff. Yeah, super cool. I didn't even know machine learning was in the Ruby space yet at that point.
I mean, it kind of wasn't. And that's one of the questions I had in the Q&A is why didn't you do this in Ruby? I listened to your guys' first episode, and I think it's more similar to what Joe has been doing using Crew AI as his Python AI.
Man, I didn't know we were going to get into that right away.
I mean,
in the first 2 minutes. Hey,
but yeah,
so I actually
I
had
was
to
doing
look this
Python
up.
and OpenCV at the time, but
Okay.
Rails has always been my Ruby is my love language, I like to say. I have a Ruby in my wedding ring. But yeah, I've always had Rails backends for all of these computer vision applications and AI projects that I've done. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so I mean, that really set the stage for me personally, following your content, because your talks since then have just been spot on to a lot of things I'm interested in as well. And Active Agent, awesome framework. I think coupling AI to the Rails framework is a really smart choice, and something I think the community will see how powerful it is and valuable soon enough. So I would love to dig in here and kind of get your high level, what even got you on this path to begin with?
No, that's how far do we want to go back? I mean, honestly, it started with video games and playing video games with my dad and getting into programming. And Rails is something I found in 2007. Obi Fernandez's The Rails Way was my first purchase on Amazon, I found out recently, in an icebreaker. An icebreaker for a company I used to work for, I guess about a year ago, almost. And I joined the company as a staff AI engineer. And I thought I would be doing more Rails and Python because they were a Rails monolith, and that's what I had been doing in the past for AI. And I ended up doing a lot of Next.js there. So little Next.js apps built around the Rails monolith as a service and using the Vercel AI SDK. And, it wasn't what I thought I would be doing. And I was frustrated we didn't have that kind of tooling in the Rails ecosystem. There are interesting frameworks in Python. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the name LangChain and what they're doing. And Crew AI, Joe, I know you're using. Even those, in my opinion, pale in comparison to the full stack integration that you get with Vercel's AI SDK. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with Active Agent. So Active Agent is the framework and the gem. And an Active Agent class is really just an abstract controller. And so the concept of agent-oriented programming is something that I am trying to dig up. Apparently, it's a 30-year-old term. The way I think about it, the way I think about it is object-oriented programming, except instead of our classes representing lifeless objects with properties and functions or attributes and methods, if you will, they can actually have more of a persona and perform these actions. I honestly started this as a joke last year at Sin City Ruby. I just joked about the name after Obi's talk at Sin City Ruby. It was his first talk in a while, talking about the content for his new book that's out now. And Landon Gray was there, Irina Nazarova, and Marco Roth. And so those three are definitely big influences on this existing. And after teasing that, I didn't really think about it again. I went to Ruby Kaigi. And while I was in Japan, this is my first Ruby Kaigi, and while I was in Japan, Rails World tickets sold out instantly. And I got a message from Rena, and she's like, hey, did you get a Rails World ticket? And I was like, no. It was like 4 a.m. when they went on sale, and they sold out like immediately, just like they did this year. I was also in Japan. I did score a corporate ticket this year that I paid for. But Arena, I think, I'm not sure. I think she had extra ones from CFP submissions, or she purchased an extra one, and she kind of used that as leverage. She said that I can have the ticket under one contingency, that I actually build this. Because I had talked to her in the past, since she's moved to, I guess like since before she moved to San Francisco, we've become good friends and spent a lot of time chatting about open source and those ideas that I've mostly had in my head. And some of them I've built out, like the computer vision for watching plants grow. I did make a couple Python packages out of that, and I know at least one person used it. But I was teasing about making a computer vision application framework about 2 years ago, and I talked to her about it a bunch and never went through with it. So here we are today, and the gem is published. There are better docs coming this week, actually, and I'm doing a live coding session at SF Ruby tonight. So yeah,
that's awesome.
That's great.
Long-winded answer to a simple question.
I did make a little app for us to experiment with active agents to kind of just intake our episode. Yeah, I'll message you later about it. But yeah, really exciting. Like I just had it like, we get email intakes when guests, accept our offers to come on or beg when we plead people to come on. I just dump the email content in and extracts like the date and, questions, topics. It does a whole bunch of research for us, which is nice. Awesome. Yeah, it's super straightforward to use the active agent for that. So
that's great to hear.
Yeah, really excited. I mean, I'd love to take a step back again, because this is the year of agents, supposedly, right? Like in the AI world, right? So they say. And you mentioned, agent-oriented programming. Like, there's a bunch of like agentic stuff coming out. Like, Hugging Face has small agents for coding agents, and there's the agent-to-agent protocols that Google announced, right? So, I mean, like, what is an agent to you? What are you building and driving? What's your driving force for like abstraction around this like concept of an agent?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to like MVC. Like that's something that really drove web development, and figuring out thinking about a computer vision application framework. Like what is the controller in this situation? Like model's an overloaded term now, but what are the data models that we need to interact with? And then like a view layer is something that I feel like a lot of people have just been overlooking, except for Vercel. And now Maestra built on top of Vercel is expanding on that idea of agents that can interact with users with generative UI rather than just like everything being a chat. And so, yeah, I think for me, an agent is a controller. And the context is that model representation of whatever the agent's interacting with. And it has access to active record as well. Since it's just a controller, like Action Mailer is just a controller. And it also has access to Action View. So you can have templated prompts and templated views that can be rendered to the agent or rendered to the user. And it's the C in the MVC. But yeah, I think agent is also an overloaded term,
Yeah, it absolutely is. it's already annoyed me.
Everyone's excited about coding agents. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of it's hype. This AI hype cycle has actually reminded me a lot of crypto. I've been doing AI development for a decade now, and yeah, I did a little bit of work for Web3 clients in like 2017 to 2019, and
yeah, didn't we? We don't have to talk about that. We all did.
Thank you. but so like, I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out what the value is here. There's definitely more value in this than crypto. I don't know if that's replacing developers. I don't think that's like where the value is. Code generation's interesting. I think there is value in that, but it's not to replace us or junior developers. I think that's really short-sighted and more of a mask for mass layoffs than anything to pad Microsoft's stock and others that have made layoffs and claims of like Meta saying 30% of their code is AI generated. Like, good luck.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I asked this question to somebody I was talking about this very topic with yesterday. It's like, well, I'm not so nervous for me, but I'm nervous for the junior engineers because they won't have jobs. And I'm like, okay, so does development just stop when we retire or die, like when the old guys are done? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. That's not really how the industry works. Sometimes industries go away, but it's not like that.
Yeah. And I mean, even with computer vision models, like I started with YOLO v3 back in like 2015, and the last production application I was working on YOLO v8 in 2023. So like right at the cusp of like GPT-3 coming and like becoming mainstream. But it's like the Ron Burgundy quote, like 60% of the time it works 100% of the time. Like,
yeah,
it's
sure
like
does.
When we were detecting cow faces, we could detect maybe 8 out of 10 cow faces. When we were identifying cows, it was like maybe 60% of those 80% of the cow faces that we were able to identify. Watching the cows eat was actually pretty easy because it was just like optical flow. Like once we had a cow face, we could see their mouth moving and where they were. But yeah, I think I think one of the important topics you guys touched on like your first episode was evaluation and like, how do we make sure these agents are doing what they're supposed to in production? So,
well, that's an interesting topic too. I'm curious about that. From obviously I'm thinking about things from a testing perspective. I was at this, so it's Tech Week in New York right now, which is, it's fine. If you're listening and you run Tech Week, we love it. It's a lot. I mean, if you talk about a hype cycle though, it's just people talking about their AI startup and why they need millions of dollars. And, I was in a room with they were interviewing one of the chief scientists at Databricks, and it was a really interesting conversation. But he asked the crowd, it was about 100 people. He said, "Okay, how many of you are building with AI?" And every hand goes up. And I was like, "Okay, how many of you have a testing process in place to assert or refute how well your AI is working in production?" And 3 hands went up. Mine was one of them. So there were only 2 other people in the room that even thought about that enough to give it some credence. So I'm curious to know, how might we? I mean, 2 things. Does Active Agent make this any easier? Right, the idea of being able to test something non-deterministic in a production setting.
I think it can make it easier. I think monitoring for evaluation will be easier because it has like similar instrumentation to what we're used to with an action controller or other experiences in Rails. But I do think that it's something I've actually thought a lot about in the last decade is like, how do I test these things in production? Because, when we're doing transfer learning on a vision model and the vision model is supposed to detect surgical objects in an operating room, the original model that we're doing transfer learning on is trained on the COCO dataset, common objects in context. Another word that's very overloaded is context. And like these models perform well in a specific context, but you change the operating room. Operating rooms are like chaotic. Dairy barns are very like simple, dirty, but simple. And the context matters, and it took time to evaluate and annotate data in each of the operating rooms in order to get it to work across operating rooms and across facilities with different styles of operating rooms. And it's important to have a ground truth for whatever you're doing, whatever the context is, and be able to write tests for that, because you want to know like how well does this perform right now, whether it's like this prompt with this agent that has these instructions and this context, and then what about my next iteration of that. So I think right now that's less what I'm worried about. That is, though, longer term, what I'm planning to build out as part of the business model for ActiveAgent. And I know, Valentino, you were like kind of on the fence about that idea. I know that's how LangChain makes money, through Langsmith, is their prompt evaluation and like editing platform. I don't know. Crew AI's monetization is probably more like enterprise package.
It is enterprise. We don't
services.
we don't pay any money to Crew AI, and I
Yeah,
feel
that's
like
a
I'm
big
being
issue.
I feel like I'm being I feel like a little bit like I'm being nailed to the cross over Crew AI. Look, I
Oh,
just
I'm
want to
sorry.
state for the record
No,
that
hey, it's fine.
I want to state that no, it's pretty good. We actually started with LangChain, quickly moved on. It didn't have no. We use LangChain exactly what you just mentioned. We use the evaluation system because we want to know how much these things
Yeah.
cost. We moved on really quickly from the agent orchestration and moved into Crew AI. At that time, though, it was a CLI. Phoenix was a CLI, and we quickly moved on from that. And now it's more and more Rails and less Python, but there's still that Crew AI in there. But this is interesting. I know when I think about people that are now, people are already using this thing. There's hundreds of stars, and there's forks, and there's activity. But I think about what people are listening to the show and maybe like, okay, I want to start, but I have no idea, like, how am I going to put something into a spec or into a unit test and assert that what is happening in this active agent is actually working? I guess if it's an integration test and not a unit spec where you can kind of mock everything out. And I'm wondering, like, if you've given thought to that, or if in your professional background kind of implementing it, if you're helping teams do that.
Yeah, I think again, it's about knowing what this like ground truth context and scenario are, like what the objective of the agent is. And then you do have to run it against a model. And if that model changes, you need to run it again. So if you're using VCR, I heard you guys mention, you're going to have to record a new cassette because you want to know, like, and that's something I would recommend, like, as part of the CI/CD process, like deploying it into staging, maybe actually run it against a model because it would be worth the expense to do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that you can validate, like, is it actually performing as we expect or better? And that's something that's challenging depending on the context. Like where I'm talking about counting objects or counting cows, it's pretty obvious. Like the ground truth is there's 8 cows in this picture. We should be able to detect 8 cow faces. If we can detect 7 right now, we should be able to detect 7 or more on future deployments. And so like that's the scenario that you're testing against in these integration tests.
Yeah, you're so right on. There's so many different aspects of like of your agent usage, right? Like that can change the end result, right? Like, we talk about determinism and non-determinism, and like so much of how you build the thing, right? Like can make it less deterministic, right? Like the tools that you use, even the number of them, like a small word that you've changed, you've moved a period in a different position from the prompt, right? Like if you like provided the same content but in a different format, right? Like there's like all these variations that can like affect it. And the ground truth is like your end result that you expect the behavior. And as agents start to move, right, like they perform actions. So like how do you monitor those actions is like another aspect. But it does make me think. I watched Matz's keynote from the recent Kaigi, and it was like all AI, right? And like his underlying concept
I'm surprised.
I was very surprised myself. I loved it, but one of my key takeaways that I think I'm a heavy alignment on is like the concept of like we're at this critical moment of like either we're going to be building things for the AI or we're going to be like building things. Like who's the master, right? Like the AI or us, right? And like we're kind of at this critical point of like, are we just building things because like it's what the AI demands, or are we building things so that we can demand things of the AI? And like the commonality of all of these things is like the human interface element, right? And like the basically the natural language is that like moment of instruction, but also like to your point of like evaluating, gathering those ground truths and annotating and like finding all of the truths of your data that you expect of the context, right? So like if you're in a stall with cows and like you want to know how many cows are in there, like well, okay, well, what kinds of cows, like there may be other important details that like you can't just, the AI won't be able to gather from context of an image, right? But like you being more descriptive may help it infer the generation and the end result better. And so like I'm curious, like where do you see the abstractions heading for like pulling out and drawing out those ground truths during the process, and like what point in the process do you start like thinking about those?
Yeah, I think it's a challenging topic because it goes back to people are still trying to figure out what to do with these things. I think once you know what your use case is, like, and there are a few good examples that I know people are posting about publicly. Like, are you guys familiar with Jordan Trevino? He
Nope.
runs an agency, Telos Labs, and they're working on
Oh, I do know Telos Labs. Okay.
a product called Simple Docs, and it's like legal document review redlining. I also know Kelly Sutton is doing something in like for, I think it's called Scholarly, and it's for like resume reviews for academic candidates for
Yeah,
roles at
very cool.
universities. And so like these examples, like it is a little more straightforward. Like you have whatever legal document and then whatever expectation of what these red lines should be, or whatever expectation of being able to parse out this unstructured resume data into some structured data set. So having that, it's still like you need to have a collection of these ground truths in order for it to be, you know, useful and valid, because again, it's all about the context. If it's a different type of resume, it might be parsed differently. Different type of legal document might not see certain things that it's supposed to see. And then that gets into like, well, how do you make it see those things? You have to change the prompt probably. And then once you change the prompt, does it still do what it was supposed to do in the beginning for your other ground truth data? And so that's where I think, again, it's a complex problem. And I think that's part of why a lot of these frameworks haven't spent as much time on those problems. Like Vercel's AI SDK, for example, they show you how to tie in with like OpenTelemetry and OpenLLMetry projects. Like there are services that are specifically about evaluation tooling, like New Relic, but for agents and prompts. And I think that's kind of the space that I'm interested in for the future of active agents as a business. Right now, active agents, I'm just looking for consulting work, doing contract development to help build out the framework and build it into people's products. So,
Well,
yeah.
I'm always interested in the business side, obviously, or maybe not, obviously, but because I run a business. And I mean, to me, that sounded like that sounds compelling. Okay, well, I'm going to start, I'm going to start building AI into my legacy Rails app, and I'm a medium to enterprise business. I want the guy who wrote the library to come and help us. But then you mentioned something about different ways of monetizing. I think that's actually probably because I've run a consultancy for 11 years. I'm like, oh, that sounds a lot better. Like, do a product, do something where people are gonna pay you a few cents per transaction, or a few $100s per month or something like that.
I've heard both
And so,
sides.
yeah, well, it's interesting because Brian Helmkamp, just parachuted out of Code Climate, and then there was another gentleman also just wrapped up product, and they both started consultancies. And I'm sitting here like running consultancy for 10 years. I'm like, I would never do that. I would totally start a product company. So yeah, The
Grass
grass
is
is always
always
greener.
greener. Yeah.
You know
Chance.
what it sounds like is we're about to see a super critical moment here where Active Agent starts to create like a baby AGI style business support mechanism where
I
it
would
Now
love
can
you're
it.
talking.
identify the critical aspects of your business to focus on, you know,
Yeah.
and then sell, and then if it doesn't sell, be like, this isn't worth it.
Yeah. You could be like the SBA, like the Small Business
Right.
Association of the
Oh, that
AI
would be awesome.
world.
Yeah, and it makes me think about what we were talking about before is like marketing for open source and marketing for dev tools is a challenge. One of the initial bits of feedback we got and I'm doing this with my partner, Rhiannon Payne, who's also marketing director at Ruby Central. And one of the bits of feedback was it sounds like something we have to pay for just because of the marketing copy that she put on the website. And people were very vocal about not wanting to pay for anything. Like developers want everything for free. Open source should be free, right?
Yeah.
And like there are, in my mind, like two like prototypical examples of where you could go with open source to monetize, and that's like the pro enterprise gem side of things, like Mike Perham did with Sidekick, or there's
Hmm.
services like
Or
Honey
the
Badger.
Mutant Gem, similar, free for open
Yeah, I know
source.
Karafka.
Mhm.
I got to meet Magic. Can't say his name properly, so I just call him Magic. He said that's
Mhm.
okay. Um, he's the creator of Karafka, another active jobs runtime for Kafka. And he has pro and enterprise licensing now. One of his bits of advice was don't wait 10 years to monetize it. I was like, oh,
It's good
it's good.
advice.
I can't. But yeah, I think the other side of it is building out a service like what Honey Badger did for error monitoring. I think I started using Honey Badger maybe like 2012, 2013, like early on. Same with Sidekick, actually. The startup I was working for at the time was one of the first pro customers. And what they've done, like they've focused on Rails first, but now they do other languages, other frameworks. And that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I don't want to lock people into using ActiveAgent or Ruby and Rails. Like, but initially, that's where I am and what I'm thinking about. So I'll start there, and if it makes sense to open it to other languages and frameworks, like it is model agnostic, but maybe there could be more there.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic of discussion. Is like, you know, it's funny how coupled like what you build is to the model that you've chosen. And I'm curious your thoughts if you like even agree with that one, but also like do you look to, because you have a lot of machine learning like background, and so like model selection is a very important part of like machine learning, right? So like, do you think about that in the AI space, or is it just like pick one
Yeah.
and go with it? You
No,
know, like
definitely. Like you need to know not just the model, but all of the parameters you used and like generate, like, again, this isn't built into the framework now and testing and evaluations on your own terms, but I would highly suggest generating like a checksum value, like a fingerprint, like you see in the API responses of some of these providers, of whatever it is you put into it and storing that in a database or in active storage or somewhere for reference. So you know it was this model, this version, these parameters that generated this result. And that's for testing and for production. It's
yeah,
not just about like the cost and like number of tokens, but it's like, what did changing the temperature do? What did this prompt as part of that fingerprint do? And the fingerprint will change as you change all of those things. And that's something I've built out in Python for computer vision. And that's why I was like, oh, I'll build a computer vision application framework, because I've had to redo a bunch of stuff in OpenCV every time. And first time I did it with Celery, if you're familiar with Celery.
Oh,
Yeah. And then the second time I did it with Factory, which was fun. If you're familiar with Factory, it's
yep.
a Go service built by Mike Perham to be language agnostic queuing and dequeuing. So
Yeah, you know, that
it's
was
fun.
one. This reminds me of like when I saw this library was like Rails specific, I just like my mind started going everywhere with like all the different tooling that's available in Rails, right? Like,
Right.
and that like you've been building into, looking in like you have like active support notifications, right, for instrumentation, which is like awesome, like because there's if you're like doing instrumentation in Rails, you're like already hooking into that, right? And so like it would be like a one line change to add active agents instrumentation like to that pipelining, which is awesome. But like I start to think about other things too, right? Like like action mailer previews, like what does an agent look like previewed, like what does a view even look like as an agent? Like I'm curious, like what are your thoughts? Let's focus there. Like what do you even like imagine an agent looks like from like a view layer? Like it seems like there's so many permutations of that, which Rails honestly is a great candidate for, where you could have multiple different formatting versions of a view for whatever you're trying to render. What does an agent look like in different formatting? Like,
Yeah. I comparing it to Action Mailer is something I do a lot because it's very similar. Like I spent a lot of time thinking of like I didn't start off thinking controller. I'm pretty sure I probably started off like where everyone else did with like, oh, it might be a model. But it's important to just remember that it is an abstract controller. So any public method you define in your agent class becomes an action. And like abstract controller makes it so these action methods can be performed and have callbacks. And I've built in queued generation similar to queued delivery for Action Mailer. And one of the things I didn't do yet was the previews. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's something I've been thinking about as I am developing and testing. I think the simplest way to think about views for an agent would just be the prompt template that you're using or instruction templates. So like a plain text email template is something you could consider it like analogous with. But then from the example of using Next.js as part of my inspiration, generative UI is the concept of being able to render view partials like HTML partials or JSON partials, depending on how you're trying to do it. And I think that's where things could be more interesting. And like, yes, in conversations, you can imagine like even just like the iMessage interactions you can have, like sending money in a conversation is something that iMessage brought up. Actions and interactions are actually something we built into a client project in 2020. And I really hope they have gotten on the whole large language model thing, because it was like an SMS interface to communicate with underserved communities and help them go through these pathways to becoming more successful and having more resources. And so you can think about it in a chat interface of like, yeah, when you share a link, it gives you a link preview, but it could also give you like some kind of interactive form builder experience. And that's what we were building when I was at Fountain, which I don't think is necessarily like the best solution. Again, like everyone's thinking, oh, chatbots, like we'll just have chat do everything. But when it comes down to it, like filling out a form is often faster and making someone fill out like a 5-field form through a conversation can be painful. Even if it's cool and has like a location lookup widget and like other widgets that you can interact with, it's still just a form in a conversation.
I'm leaning more and more every day to just like single text box. And
yeah, or
have it do a
like
bunch of
a
stuff.
button click that does something.
Yeah,
A
button
good
click.
example I heard of recently, someone was using ActiveAgent just for translation. So that translate button,
Yes.
translate it to my locale. When you click translate, very simple, like context is small, it's simple, it's not this back and forth agent interaction, it's not a complex workflow, but it is a good use case. I think one of the challenges is, again, like, I hate the example of like a weather app. I've been trying to figure out like what should like the like basic example app be. Like it's challenging, and
Weather.
it depends for whatever your business like is doing.
Yeah.
Like another one I heard was in quizzes to help instruct the student on their wrong answer, on like what to do better, you could provide them with a hint button that provides them with a hint with the context of the question and how they answered wrong. And depending on what they're answering, like that could be interesting because the context might be different each time. And so giving them some kind of, again, prompting to the user, to that student of like, oh, you know, like not just being like, you answered this, but it's actually this, you know, kind of guiding them based on their answer to the right question, like a teacher.
Yeah,
I like that as well. Yeah.
Context building is such a interesting concept, right? Because like that, it's like almost as critical as the prompt that you use. I would say maybe more so in a lot of cases. But it's also like how you gather up all of that context is separate from like how you format it as well, and the point at which point do you gather the context, right, is also important. It's almost like a it almost seems like there's a context framework missing of like gathering up context as you're using and doing something to the point of use, like and it seems like they're two separate completely separate things, right, even from an agent, right? Like because we talk about like even in the industry like retrieval, like going out and fetching external information, right, like at the point of use, right? But it's like there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens before you even get there that's also valuable, right? And like how you gather it and get it to that point of use is like just as important. So like I'm curious what your thoughts are on like, you know, what do you try and do to like make sure that you have the right context for those two different kind of use cases, right?
Yeah. I'm going to try to answer without saying the word context. But, and I'm glad you said retrieval and not retrieval augmented generation or RAG, which I think has become synonymous with vector search for some reason.
I'm trying my
But
best not
we
to
were
say
using
that
vector
word.
search on cow faces in 2016. There was no large language generation in the background. I think what other frameworks I've seen, and I actually like you saying that it's like another framework, because within ActiveAgent is like two separate frameworks. There's the generation provider framework and there's action prompt. And action prompt is like that abstraction layer on top of abstract controller. The generation provider is that abstraction on top of large language model interactions, as well as having some form of, I have to say it, context management. But in other frameworks, what
Didn't even
I've
get that
seen,
far
I
into
know,
the answer.
close. In other frameworks, what I've seen them call it is memory. Joe, I don't know if you use like the long or short-term memory within Crew AI's framework. It seems
I
like
don't
an
know.
interesting
I'd have to ask
concept.
my engineers. Yeah,
Yeah, like
I haven't heard it come up, so I'm going to say no. But I could
and
be wrong.
then I don't think Vercel really touches on it, but Maestra, again, which is built on top of Vercel, it's by the people that did Gatsby. If you guys are familiar with the web framework Gatsby, yeah. They also have this concept of memory, and it's something I considered like last summer working on as part of like an initial release. But then I was like, you know, I have to like do something. I can't just like do everything at first. But one thing that I'm glad I landed on active agents as controllers, and like the naming active is a tough one too, and action. Actually, DHH posted about active job and the new continuation feature for resumable jobs, and he posted action job. So it made me feel better about, because like active agent talks to a background, action mailer talks to a background. You really shouldn't be doing these things in the foreground, but it is a controller. And the aspect of it being a controller gives you a lot of opportunity to take a step back and think about it like an MVC framework. And in my controller actions, what models do I need to query for? What third-party services might be needed within these actions? And what's the best way of proxying those into my, Rails app? And just thinking about it as Rails application actions that you can retrieve whatever data models that you need and then perform some kind of process on in the action. And then like that helps you break down these problems, which again, I think it's like a lot of people are trying to figure out like, what is long-term memory? Like, is that the whole conversation? Is conversation really like, is chat and messages the best way to think about these things? Like you could do it for like logs. like a log, like paper trail of things could be your context. I said it again.
Yeah,
But
it's funny. I feel like Obi's first Magma chat, that he had a concept of memory, where it
mhm.
was just like a log at first. It just like went through a timestamped, right? Like I think he even had topics attached to him uh, for like tagging and doing better retrieval. I'm glad you brought up memory because there's like some very
Did it help you
open
remember something?
concepts of evaluations attached to memory and retrieval, right? Like there's precision and like recall, and there's like known bounds to and trade-offs for each like aspects of these, uh, you know, trade-offs. And so I'm curious, like if you have tooling or like how you reason about like uh, those specific aspects, right? Like of weighing the trade-offs for what is going to be most valuable for this particular retrieval mechanism or storage feature, right? Like as it relates to like the AI's usage.
Yeah, I think again it's gonna be a challenge without the context of what product you're building.
Right.
But it is really going to end up being similar to just best practices for building a controller or for building background jobs, knowing that, like, again, an action mailer action is going to be performed in a background job most likely. And background jobs should kind of have a focused unit of work. And if you need to do
Mm-hmm.
anything else, you can always have another background job for that. So keeping things concise is very important. That's actually one thing I really liked about Obi's talk that he did last year, and I think he did something similar at Rails World as well, just on the topic of his book and like these small workers, as he called it, something like that, and like having your agents again be focused on some kind of resource or objective or operation, some domain that like this is a travel agent. It helps you plan travel. Like
Yeah.
that's a concept I've been thinking about toying around with for personal reasons and past experience.
Yeah,
But
it's so easy to let, you know, to not close the loop on a lot of things, right? You mentioned like, oh, just throw things in the background. And it's like, if you've ever played with any of these code generation things, like it so easily like gets stuck in a loop of its own of just
Yes.
continuously generating the wrong thing that, or not wrong thing, but like it doesn't know, but like
yeah,
generating a thing that you don't desire. And so, yeah, I mean, closing that loop is like I feel like one of the biggest challenges of making like agent related things. And what are your like best practices or guidance like on that, like keeping things like tight and consolidated to the goal?
still working on best practices. Docs actually have a lot of love coming very soon. I have something in a branch that I'm going to publish, but I think best practices are still something that I'm working to define. Again, that's why like contracting and having more projects to help build out the framework is something that's important. And I'm looking for contributors, both individual developers having issues using it and companies trying to build products into it. Um, but I think from that context, I said it again. Um, from that perspective, it's kind of similar to like retry logic for background jobs, right? You don't want it to just endlessly retry. Like at a certain point, it should just be a dead job. And so it's similar in the sense of like this agent should have some opportunity to perform. It actually might need retries because of a network issue or rate limiting or something like that. Um, but other than just basic retry logic, it's like give it a certain amount of cycles or runs or steps. I've heard different frameworks use different terms. That's another thing. Like request response cycle is something that we've gotten very used to. Like the prompt generation cycle is something that I've been playing around with as like a
Mm.
concept. And then like, yeah, agent to agent interactions. We've been doing stuff like that. Servers make web requests to servers all the time. I actually joke about this in like a facetious way that everyone's an AI engineer now because we all make web requests, right?
That's
Yeah.
true.
So yeah, I think
And
these are definitely very interesting questions, and similar happened on the last podcast I was on. It's like, this is great. And like, again, like working with clients has been great inspiration for figuring out like what else can I build into like this free open source, and then what are like the valuable things that people are willing to pay for. That's something I'm still figuring out.
Well, this is interesting to me because I clocked this gem before the show started, and it's like just looking at the lib directory, 1,450 lines of code, 1,444 of which are Ruby, and it's tight, it's concise and expressive, and I love it. And then I'm thinking, man, what's he going to do to this thing? Like, what is he going to add, right? How big does it get? Because when it's this small, first of all, I didn't think that you could. I expected the library to be larger just to do what it does today, which is
Rails
it's
does
substantial.
a lot for us.
Rails does a lot for us, which is excellent and reassuring to know. But you have something that is this small. It's easy to test. It's easy to manage. But I'm curious to know, like, okay, when inevitably either new requests come in or new use cases come in, whether or not those are tied to business incentives, what happens to the library? Does the library itself grow, or do you imagine it more in like a universe of libraries that can be built?
Yeah, I've thought about it in regard to like Bullet Train or Jumpstart Rails, if you're familiar, or just Rails itself. Like Rails is made up of many gems, and like I said, Action Prompt could be a separate gem. The generation provider gem could be a separate gem. There are other gems that are very similar to the generation provider gem. So like what I'm planning on and haven't really done yet is breaking those into separate gems, but they'll all live in the same repo similar to Rails. And you could install them separately or together with ActiveAgent as like that.
Yeah,
gem.
my gold standard of that is Samuel Williams. I just love his structure. It's just so tiny. If you ever go look at like any of his like async related things, they're just like hyper focused,
All of
super
the async
small,
related
and then like
things.
they'll just reference a bunch of other gems if you want them, right? Like you want to add like streaming HTTP. There's async HTTP just for that, and it makes it both harder to work with, but also easier to work with from like a reading perspective.
Yeah,
So
even individual generation providers I've thought about, like, maybe I shouldn't have these be within the core gem. I've
yeah,
noticed like other libraries like Vercel's AI SDK, they're all separate packages for each provider. And that opens it up to like, and Mike kind of did something like this with Factory, where like, I think he supports Ruby and Go
yeah,
consumer
the
and producers.
FAKT or what? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but like the
super cool
Python one
library.
is a community
Yeah,
package, and it opens it up more to having community maintainers of these things that I might not want to do, and like might not need for any of my projects. So like it's something I was talking to Chris Oliver about too. Is his pay gem? He supported a different pay provider other than Stripe, and he regrets it because now he has to maintain it even though he doesn't
right.
use it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's something I'm trying to be mindful of. But yeah, we'll see.
Well, this dovetails into what I was thinking about, the long game of gem maintenance.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mike D'Alessio at the top of the show. He's one of my best friends in this
Yeah.
industry, and he has been maintaining Ruby gems for like almost as long as I've even been writing Ruby,
Is
or
he, is he
probably
the
longer than I've been
Nokagiri
writing Ruby.
guy?
He's
He's
no
the no
Kagiri,
Giri guy.
yeah. But many
Wow, just
others,
like hold on.
I know,
Yeah, I
yes,
know,
yes, he'll
right?
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But many others, I think I was looking at, Tailwind CSS the other day, and I went to look at like the latest release or something like that, and and it's Mike D'Alessio who's just done the latest release. I'm like, this is, and I texted him, but I think having released a gem myself in the distant past, like I think you think that you're going to release this thing, people are going to use it or not, and the community will maintain it. But really, it falls on the shoulders of one person. It's not always the creator. Mike didn't write Nokagiri, but he's the maintainer. So it
Yeah.
falls on
Nate Berkowitz didn't write Puma, but he's now the maintainer.
Exactly, right. And so I guess, what do you think about that? Well, I've got like a two-part question. One, what kind of collaboration and also requests are coming in now for this gem. Well, it's it's early, but it's still popular for its age, I'll say. And then also, what do you think long term in in terms of growth and community support,
Yeah, I
or hopefully
mean,
just Justin support?
yeah. Well, I definitely. That's actually one of the questions I had uh, the last time SF Ruby was at Chime. I think was like, and this was before I even released, like published any gem for it. I just had like the website, and they were like, "Do you offer long-term support?" And I was like, "How do you know you want long-term support? No one's used it yet." And it is something that I am passionate about and currently all in on, in terms of like, I've talked to a number of founders and people looking to contract me for Python work. And it's been tough to say no because there's more interest in me doing Python and Next.js work than there is in doing like Rails AI contract work.
Well, we're here
And
to change that.
yeah, that's like the whole thing. And that was what my like Rails 20 or sorry, RubyConf 2022 talk was about, was like, if we want to do AI in Ruby, we can. I actually put together a proposal with the former interim executive director at Ruby Central. I presented a proposal for some kind of Ruby AI working group. Because again, this is something that like, it shouldn't just be on Andrew Kane to build everything. Like the Onyx runtime Ruby is something I used just for fun to see if I could do inference on my GPU instead of using Python. And it didn't work. I opened an issue and he fixed it in a week. And now CUDA execution provider support works in Ruby. So you can do computer vision inference on your GPU, and it's just as fast as Python. There's nothing special about Python other than the corporate and academic sponsorship that they've had. And that's, there are a lot of tools we're still lacking. Large language models aren't everything. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jupyter Notebooks or Google Colab.
Absolutely.
It's a way I've used to manage data scientists to get like their thoughts on paper so that engineers can actually build products out of what they're thinking.
Yeah, that's great because you actually can't build the product out of the notebook. So you can
data scientists
cut them
shouldn't
off
be
right
building
there.
product. Exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
It was a wild experience using Jupyter Notebooks with Ruby.
There is like
Landon had that talk on it. Yeah.
I did a workshop with Landon and Max Irwin doing basically search in the context of AI, and it was all with Jupyter Notebooks and Ruby, stepping through each thing. It was pretty wild. It's hard because as Rubyists we're so used to like the IRB experience where you just jump in and like you could just do anything you want. And like Jupyter Notebooks is very like here's a line, like execute it, and then it'll give you the result, right?
I mean, it's kind of like an
kind of the
interactive
same
console. Like each cell is either markdown or code, and then like a code block can be executed, and you get the results.
But as a result too, if you jump down the list, it's hard to get used to that, right? Like if you jump down the file and you're like, I'm going to execute this and see what it does. It's like, oh, well, you have to execute everything before it manually, right? And so like that was hard to get used to. But I do love just being able to like execute it and see it and like nicely formatted, and you can provide all the data sets that you need. Really awesome.
And you can run it in a Dockerized container environment. That's another thing I've been considering as like a business opportunity, similar to Hugging Face Spaces, having these interactive runtimes where you can have your own Docker image, because like Andrew Kane actually has a Docker image for CUDA support on the Onyx runtime Ruby.
Oh, cool.
To get like, a proper version of CUDA installed so that you can use the Onyx runtime with CUDA. Even though it wasn't working with Onyx runtime Ruby, he had all of that. And like that's stuff I had to do for all of the computer vision projects in Python as well. And like sharing those kinds of dependencies, sharing these like snippets of code and like example applications, I think is really lacking in the Ruby community. Elixir has live books. I don't know if you guys are familiar.
I love live books.
Like
No,
Yeah.
I haven't used them.
And so
Jose
like
Valim, he is
he's
magic.
great.
He's really
Yeah.
missed, I
They have
think.
a lot of first
Yeah.
party, yeah, they have a lot of first party support for cool things like that and other machine learning libraries because of him. And I think I'm really excited. Have you guys seen what the Evil Martians are doing with the Rails guides to make it
Hmm.
interactive and in the browser?
It's so
Like
cool.
running in the browser? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of cool things, like Docker environments are great, but having access to like a browser you can just open and run and like use your own computer's resources, but not have to worry about installing stuff, or at least having like a simple way of installing it in some kind of containered environment, I
It
think is
is
really cool.
remarkable to how much you can run on a web GPU even.
Yeah,
Uh,
WebGPU is very impressive. I'm
uh,
I'm I'm excited for more local model
yeah,
runtimes.
totally. I mean, Hugging Face is just absolutely crushing it in this space, I think.
Yep.
I've played with a lot of their like JavaScript tooling where you can run Onyx models like in the browser with like web components and stuff. And it just like works. You just like say, "Hey, use this model," and like run it. It's slow, right? But that's just now, right? Like all of those problems will get solved over
They used to
time.
actually have better free GPU
Oh, I know.
Docker containers. But yeah, you can actually, I think a lot of Rubyists don't recognize you can still download those Onyx models and run them in Ruby. I met a Rubyist at
Yep.
RubyKaigi that was doing exactly that for vector embeddings using the Onyx runtime. No large language models to do image-based vector search. So
Yeah,
again, like,
if you guys want to learn more about that, at the Ruby AI Builders Discord, there's like discussions all the time of people like just running pure vectorization, like search locally super fast. Like you wouldn't believe some of the throughput and that like people have been getting with Ruby vector generation and doing semantic similarity search just locally. It's pretty wild. I mean, Mistral is surprisingly good at that as well, getting those like more dense vector stuff. I guess that's like a question I have for you. Like when people are starting to look into like semantic similarity related search mechanisms, like I coming back to this like model selection aspect, like what's your workflow for like aligning the use case to the model that you're selecting? Because I feel like that's always a roadblocker to me personally when I'm like, oh, I want to use an Onyx model, and then I just see all the models there are, and I have this use case, and it's like just like it becomes too much for me to sit down and think about that I just like move on. Like
yeah,
what's your like thought process and workflow for like aligning that better?
it depends on the stage of the product and the infrastructure you already have to work with. Like I'm a big fan of, again, Andrew Kane. Like I think I'm the president of the Andrew Kane fan club at this point. So PG Vector and the Neighbors gem, but you can use the Neighbors gem with other vector embedding databases, and I think it goes back to having some kind of test bed for those things, where you can be like, okay, here's an example of doing it with this, but like here's my data set, and I need to see how that works in it. And yeah, it is a challenge right now to do a lot of these things in Ruby. Like I know Gusto is actually um, has some Python developers at least, or hiring Python developers as well to do like, yeah, right, to do like model training and things
Yeah.
where like, yeah, you could struggle with some of Andrew Kane's libraries to train models in Ruby instead of using PyTorch or whatever you might be using. But um, yeah, I think that it is kind of just like a trial and error and experiencing what you can and finding out what works. But again, if you already have Postgres, try it in Postgres. Like you don't need to spin up another dependency. And
So I'm curious what you see missing from the Ruby community in regards to like
I have a whole
pushing people
document.
out, right? Like, yeah. Like how can we what are we missing like to make this aspect like non-trivial, right? Like or trivial? I always forget which one. Easier
You
to
know,
like
it's not just
snap
tooling.
in.
I think it goes back to like the whole academic support. And that's one thing I'm
Mm,
really excited for. Ruby Central's new executive director. She seems to have an interesting, fresh perspective of getting Ruby into schools. And I think that also will play into like a lot of this topic that we've heard for years now. I know Joe Massalotti did a talk at Rails SAS that I got to see on the topic of junior developers. And like everyone's going to be using JavaScript and Python because that's what they're teaching in schools. Like, or Java and Python is what I had an opportunity to learn when I was sort of going to school. And if we're not helping figure out what is taught to new developers, like we're going to miss out on a generation of new developers, or everything's just going to be AI generated, and I don't know.
We'll all be out of job.
Then it won't
But we'll
matter.
still have this
Maybe.
podcast.
Something to talk
So,
about.
that's interesting because we spent the first two episodes of the show, I think a lot of times we were saying, and I know I was saying, hey, why not Ruby? Why not us? But one thing that I really love about Active Agent is that that's not asking that question. Active Agent is saying, hey, you should use this because look how well it leverages into Rails. And we've talked all about that this episode, right? Look at how much Rails provides. That's why you should use it. There's a proactive reason, not just like a, hey, I like Ruby and I like AI, so let me use it. And I do think that we need more, and Valentino mentioned tooling, and you've mentioned sort of underwriting by academics or others. There needs to be more proactive, like, hey, this is why you should choose Ruby over
Better marketing.
whether it's JavaScript, right? So what we need is next episode, we get Rhiannon on here, talk about how we're going to market this thing. No, but in a real way, it is the tooling. It is people saying, well, no, you should use Ruby because X isn't. I mean, look, I love Ruby. You said Ruby is your love language. I totally identify with that. I don't need a reason. But I think in general, like to the computing public, we should have good reasons.
Yeah, I heard you talking about Django on the last episode, and I've always avoided it. I used Flask for the first computer vision application I built, and Fast API for the most recent one, and it always just felt weird to me, and I just feel like Rails has a great opportunity to kind of take the lead again in terms of like a framework of choice for building AI applications, where right now I would say Next.js really has like, I wouldn't even say use Python, like use Next.js. It's like full stack, but use Active Agents. But like really, like I would like to see more new startups use Rails as like their framework of choice, that one person framework to build an AI application. I would like more incumbents like the Gusto or Shopify to continue using Ruby for more machine learning and other aspects, not just generative AI.
Good news there is that there are more and more startups, especially from like greenfield startups that are saying, yeah, Rails, of course, that makes sense.
Yep.
At least they're saying that to me. Maybe I'm a little heavy-handed. Like they're not going to tell me they want to write in Python. But I've, on a serious note, I think there is an uptick in people saying, yes, I want to build with Rails. And of course, every business idea here has some kind of AI component.
Yeah, you make a great point about the academic aspects, right? Because like even that's definitely one thing I've seen that has like prevented the Ruby infiltration into like all this machine learning aspects is like the academic supporters of the institutions that are like pumping all this stuff out, right? Like at Stanford or whatever, whatever team is there, like they're using Python because like they're supported like by Google or whoever else may be building these, or like Meta, right? To use the tooling and languages that they use, right? To build the byproducts.
R.
MATLAB.
Yeah. Or
I don't know.
R.
Like, have you ever seen a data scientist use Ruby though?
I have. Well,
I have.
So like that's
but
what
they
I'm
really
saying,
like
though.
R.
I feel like the academic aspects, even from like a AI scientist, I guess we're calling them now, right? If somebody's like deep in the machine learning realm, right? Like, or training models or all of these things, like, all of this tooling that has already been built, right? They're taking advantage of. So we have like, unfortunately, a lot of catch up to do in the Ruby community to build that tooling, right? And I think that is one thing that's holding us back even from the academic aspects, is because like we now have to build that tooling that already exists, where people are already saying, well, just use it and we'll learn how to do it, right? And so it is difficult there.
Yeah, and that's why like the other side of it is not just academic but corporate sponsorship. So I'll share this proposal with you, but the idea is having like an open grant program where
Oh,
people
cool.
could have some kind of proposal and having these like requests for proposals that companies are interested in sponsoring. Like having a direct method of sponsoring the development of a new gem to do something that is desired by a corporate entity with money and interest in Ruby.
Oh, I like that idea.
I know that Marty Hott is doing a lot in that sense for just Ruby open source,
Yeah.
leading the open source team at Ruby Central. But yeah, I would love to see more financial incentives and investment going to the Ruby community for these types of tools
Yeah,
and
you know,
active agents.
it's
And active agents.
interesting. So, like thinking about like the business aspect, right? Like that's why people love Rails. Is it's like it has all the utility and tools to just like make building business things like easier, right? To maintain, to create right off the bat. Uh, and I think that's why, like, YC is a huge contributor and like promoter of Rails, because of that, right? It's because you just make things quick. It's been a great prototyping, but also like long-term maintenance has been something that has been seen as like just also like straightforward path to success. And so I feel like that's kind of where we see this disconnect of the academics even is like we have like Rails pushing as like a business thing. Yes, use this, like it's going to be great and people are adopting it. But like then there's all these people from academics that like have missed that aspect of things. And so like where do you think like is that bridged gap? Grants are a great like starting point, but like what how can
Investing
we
in
how else can we
startups.
like show the incentives, right, to people to say, okay, like it's worth building this tooling because like really the business engine, which is Rails, is like there and people are using it, like it makes
Yeah,
sense to
I
marry
think
the two.
from running a business perspective, not having to hire a team of Python developers, like you already have a team of Ruby developers, enable them to do more with that. It's interesting you mention YC because I keep mentioning Maestra or Mastra. I don't know how they pronounce it. It's Mastra.ai. They were part of YC Winter 2024, and they are building on top of Vercel's AI SDK, doing a lot of similar things to what I'm doing. And then I think they're doing like a hosted runtime for your agents as their business model, but it's like sign up and find out. But would YC accept active agents as like cohort member? That's the kind of thing that we need more of is investment into uh, Ruby shops doing dev tooling as like a way to build out Ruby infrastructure for machine learning and AI.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
there's
good
certainly a
idea.
business case for these tools, and I think not even like yes, there's an investment case for somebody like for Y Combinator. And Y Combinator, you should invest in Justin Bowen
Thank you.
and in active agents.
There's an endorsement right there.
But there's also, but I guess it shouldn't have to stop there. I run a small dev shop. I've run a small dev shop for 10 years. One thing that we're really bad at is, putting people to work on things that are useful and can actually generate income when they're not, on a project working on something. And we all have this. We all have this Slack or Beach or Bench or whatever you want to call it. And, and it's a hard problem to solve. Some have done it really well. Most don't. And the fact is that there's income that can be used for these kinds of investments, and it makes a lot of sense to have something, even if it was always open source. Thoughtbot came to the fore by sponsoring a bunch of open source, probably kind of just took over a bunch of open source tools that everybody loved that were not necessarily being built up and maintained, and they started maintaining them. They didn't charge anything, but everybody got to know Thoughtbot that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's great marketing for consulting. That's why uh, I'm offering consulting
That's why you're
services.
doing it. No, I'm not
I mean,
trying to
that's
pull back
what
the curtain.
Evil Martians did the same thing. They built a lot of
Right,
open source. They blog a lot about open
right.
source. But I think, yeah, there is a big challenge just industry wide, not only Ruby, but open source in general, that all of these large corporations, governments depend on open source and no one wants to pay for it. And like, I had an idea on a beach, you mentioned beach, in 2021 about like just starting a company that acts as that nonprofit for corporations to donate money to, and then have that be distributed through some kind of grant program system. And again, that's what I'm hoping Ruby Central might be able to do. But like, again,
I think that might be in their roadmap.
That could be a startup in general across open sources. GitHub sponsors is one thing. I don't know if those count as donations, so it's less incentivized as like a tax write-off.
I'd be surprised if they do. Yes. Yeah.
But like, that's not. I don't know how many people are like paying the bills off of GitHub sponsorships.
Right.
I don't even have GitHub sponsorships active. Should I?
I don't know.
Like, I don't know. Yeah.
It's worth a shot,
I guess. that residual income.
Yeah.
I feel like that's every developer's dream. We joked before the show. I feel like, being open source only developers is like the dream, like the dream come true. I think for so many that just never comes to fruition. Right. Which is fine. I mean, I feel like we still get the joy out of what we build, no matter what.
Yeah, it's true. But it is kind of funny to think, well, yeah, right now I spend all day writing code in a dark room, but what I really want to do when I retire is spend all day writing code in a dark room for free. That's the dream.
I feel you.
Well, I feel like we've covered so many topics here. It's been great having you on, Justin. Are there any final topics that you wanted to discuss here? I mean, I feel like we could talk all day, to be honest. But,
yeah. I mean, I mentioned it before we went live, but I am going to be live later this evening in San Francisco at SF Ruby. I think they're also trying to connect with the Chicago Ruby meetup that's also at a Chime headquarter or office in Chicago, which will be interesting at the beginning, but it'll be live streamed and I will be doing a demo. It's simple and silly, but something fun to show what you can do with an agent-oriented controller class.
Honestly, that is
contributors looking for people to either contribute, whether it's financially or code or issues. Join the Discord if you want to participate in more conversations around the topic. It is not as poppin' as the Ruby AI Discord, but it's growing. I think, Valentino, you just joined, so you see.
Yep. I'm going to be more active in there as well as I start to...
now that we're using it.
Yeah,
open issues, complain about things. Docs will be coming online, at least by next week. I'm hoping to do it tomorrow. Rhiannon said don't try to do it today. She's also cutting me off. I can't keep working on my live demo after 1. I mean, she said you don't have to listen to this advice, but I've watched people in the back of meetups or conferences still working on stuff. I mean, I've worked on my talks, but
I worked on my talks.
I haven't done a live. I mean, I worked on my talk on the podium at RailsConf in Portland, but.
I made the mistake one time of working. I gave a talk on this project I call Podcast Buddy. It just locally listens in to the mic and summarizes topics and suggests questions and stuff. And I gave a talk at one of the Ruby AI New York City meetups before it was Artificial Ruby, I feel like. And I was working in the back on it, trying to add new features. And I'm like, wait, I have to give a presentation on this any second now. And I definitely broke something luckily I fixed it, but note to self, don't do that again.
Yeah. And no, this is my first time going, not back to back, but morning to evening. So in 11 hours, I'll be starting my talks at 7:50.
Hey, good luck.
Pacific. Thank you.
Yeah,
hopefully I'm still awake. Maybe I can take a nap. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a great conversation and a lot of interesting topics for the future.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally.
Feelings mutual.
We'll have to have you back on again, after you've given any number of talks, I'm sure, as you start building this out and people start using it, because it is addictive, you get the right abstractions in place and snap it on the right framework, and it just becomes easy to use and makes you use it more, so I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, I'm excited to make more content with it now that I'm getting it in a more stable place, because it's just been a lot of trying to make ends meet, contracting, trying to build up the framework, and it's
Yep.
starting to feel like I can actually start producing some content, and that'll be fun.
Excellent.
Fun
I
to,
will say to support that idea, I've used Sublayer quite a lot because of Scott Warner, like making all his
yeah,
content and being like, "Hey, this is something you can do." And I'd be like, "Oh, let me try that out." And like, sure enough, like, "Hey, that's great!" Like,
yeah,
so it does work.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, so at the end of the show, we like to just pick something that you know we've been super interested in. It doesn't have to be programming related, but it can be. Uh, and just that you want to share with people. It doesn't have to be anything if you don't want. But
Um, I should have thought about this because I did hear you guys mention that at the end of your first episode. Um, I've I'm gonna do it. There's a great Netflix anime called Rising Impact. It is just about golf and like a little boy that likes to hit the ball far. Like that is his special power, is driving far. And then there are other people with special powers. Like one person has like they always sink a putt because they see a shining road to the cup. I don't know. Like I just got back from a 6-week trip in Japan and I was
Yeah.
like, I want to watch something weird. And it's like a Netflix series anime and it's
oh,
weird.
cool.
Right.
I don't know why that's what came up. You said it doesn't have to be programming related.
It
Like
does.
Oh,
I've had that on the
this is good.
background, burned right through it. And
That's awesome.
but how about you guys? Because I just brought up Rising Impact. So
Well, I'm gonna plug the most interesting AI startup idea I heard this week at Tech Week. That is simultaneously the thing that I thought was. I was just gonna say I thought this was a really dumb idea when I heard it, and I'm totally wrong. It's actually brilliant. It's called Osmo AI, and their thing is, I'll put it in the chat here. Their thing is to they're giving computers a sense of smell, which is the
Oh.
silliest thing I had ever heard until I heard about what they're doing.
love it.
And they're like, now they're a lab, right? But one of the businesses they've started off the back of this is, working with perfumeries, and they can actually they shrink the time for like creating these custom scents to like a couple of weeks, where they used to take like 18 months. And the guy did a demo by like creating a scent for like just a person in the audience, just like,
awesome.
okay, what do you want? And it was very
Wow.
cool. I thought it was very cool. So
That was something from the CES. I want to say like 12 years ago. I saw where they had like a scent machine you could plug into your computer, and
Really?
like and like it would do a similar thing where you like go to a website and push a button and it would connect to the device and like produce the smell for you. So if you were at like
See.
Domino's.com, it would like produce the pizza smell for you.
it's awesome. Yeah.
Like a smell generator.
Like a
Smell
smell
Whereas
generator.
the other one's
Yeah.
a smeller.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you mentioned that, I was thinking like, oh, maybe to like detect diseases, because you've heard of like
Oh yeah,
mice
the
that
breath stuff.
or like
Oh,
dogs
yeah.
that can
Right.
yeah.
That's right.
But no,
Yeah.
no, just
See that-
smell perfume and help you.
Well,
make
I
perfume.
think perfume, maybe that just generates the dollars in the beginning. But,
I mean, hey, mine was weird. I did think of one, or I guess like SF Ruby conference, but also there's going to be an SF Ruby AI hackathon, July 19th that I'll be judging. I don't know if it's been
Oh,
announced
cool.
yet, but I will be
okay.
judging there. And yeah, it'll be great. I know Marco Roth is coming out after RailsConf to potentially participate or
That's awesome.
mentor.
Oh,
I'll
right.
also
So it's
be there
that
mentoring.
next weekend?
July 19th.
Right after
I hope it's
RailsConf,
not
I
next.
mean.
Yeah, the next weekend after RailsConf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I'm
that's
really excited
gonna be
about
awesome.
that. Yeah, just found out about that last week, so more
Uh,
relevant than Rising Impact.
I'll share this. I'll probably release it more officially by the time this episode airs. But I've been working on this project called Agentic. It's a Ruby gem. It's kind of just exploration, but it's a self-building agent framework where you just give it a goal in mind that you want to accomplish, and it goes and it assembles whatever agents that it needs to accomplish that, and sets out a plan. It's basically a plan to execute thing. that is self-building, and it generates tasks automatically and then tries and completes those tasks. It's like super just fun,
Yeah.
experimental. So like take it with a grain of salt, but like I'm just having a lot of fun with this style
Sounds
of
awesome.
yeah. And
Way
so
more serious than what me and Joe brought up.
Yes. Yes, admittedly.
This was something I was working on all last night because I was so excited. I finally got to a point where it's actually doing the things.
That's awesome.
So, but yeah, just an interesting idea, and it makes me think too of like, closing out like Ruby's expressive nature, like and ability to create its own language, right? With DSLs we've talked about before,
Yeah.
and like it'd be interesting to see what it looks like to have an LLM be able to create its own language using Ruby to define all of the different keywords and things that it needs
Yeah.
create its own language and kind of just see what it makes. Like I'd be
Hopefully
interested
it's
in
not
that.
like a Python data scientist and
I
everything's
know.
single letter attribute, like
Yeah.
variable names.
Maybe it makes Python. You're right. Like it becomes a Python interpreter, right?
Just letters for variables,
Right. Yeah.
not words.
And
Why
for
words?
anybody that's joined the last two shows live, this is now the second release into release announcement in 2 weeks for Valentino, because this podcast is actually just an elaborately disguised launchpad for
My personal
Codename V.
experimentation.
I mean, it's your platform. Use it.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Maybe it's getting you some accountability. Like you got all these projects out there that are like half
It's true.
finished. You're like, you know what? We got to get this on a schedule.
I made this list a while ago on my GitHub, like just codename V, and I just like made a list of all the things that I've like experimented with over the years, and it's just like it keeps growing, and so I figure if I keep adding to it, like maybe I'll come back and like now that there's AI to automatically like make stuff, like I could accomplish stuff, and so far so good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna keep up this this effort though, so don't expect too much more releases every time, but you never know.
It actually just reminded me of a quote I saw on Twitter, which was, "It was beautiful and nothing worked." Talking about.
Oh, I saw
what
that.
an
Yeah, I saw
LLM
that. That was great.
generated
Yeah,
from.
nothing worked, but it was gorgeous. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's great.
yeah, that was GPT-4.1. Oh no, it was or was it Anthropics? It was one of the newest releases.
No, I think it was Kurt
models.
Vonnegut that said that.
Oh, well, I guess it was quoting. They were
I'm
quoting
just
Kurt
kidding. I'm
Vonnegut.
just teasing. But nothing hurt. Anyway,
Well,
thank
thanks
you guys
again,
again
Justin.
for having me on. Yeah.
Yeah, this was incredible. I can't wait to keep releasing these episodes because I feel like we just have more and more incredible conversations, and you were, a key part of that. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your awesome framework, Activate.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Yeah, thanks for everything.
yeah, it's really coming together. I remember seeing the release with just the landing page too, and being like, wow, I can't wait to use this thing.
Yeah.
So.
Hopefully
yeah.
the docs help with adoption and yeah, get more issues and contributions. And looking forward to seeing you guys. We be at RailsConf or Rails
Yeah,
World.
It
or-
will be. Yeah,
First
Awesome.
time in a long time, I will actually be at RailsConf. So
And the
pretty
last
excited.
time.
and the last time.
And the last time, that's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you guys there. And thanks again for having me.
Yep.
All
sounds
right.
great.
Thanks. Take care, Justin.